Hi, this is Deanne from RIT, and I'm just going to share a little bit of my experience and strategies about working with volunteers in the classroom. I've taught adult language and literacy classes since about 2014, and I've worked with volunteers in a variety of contexts. And here are some things that I've found. So here are some things that I like to ask my volunteers when I meet them and they come into my classroom. So as a teacher, I find it's helpful to know, does your volunteer have any preferences for language, level, or other types of preferences? We want our volunteers to have a positive experience. Do you speak any other languages? If so, this would be a good time to share with your volunteer your philosophy about using bilingual education in that particular context and classroom. Number 3, do you have any teaching experience? A volunteer with teaching experience will usually want to do things more on their own and not be told what to do every step of the way. That may be the opposite for a volunteer who does not have any teaching experience. They might really prefer to have specific instructions about what to do with the students. Number 4, this is really important. Why are you volunteering? What do you hope to gain or get out of this experience? This helps me to know if a volunteer is coming to this for work experience, to learn more about a teaching career, to help a specific group in their community, or to make friends across different cultural boundaries. It's really helpful for me to know this so I can know where to plug them in. And number 5, are you studying to be or thinking about being a teacher? If the answer is yes, I will push those volunteers to learn as much as possible during their volunteer experience. All of this is to make sure that my volunteers feel engaged, respected, and satisfied with their volunteer experience. This will actually save me time and energy in the long run and help everyone to have a positive experience in the classroom. Thanks. So here are a couple of different ways that I use volunteers in my classroom. The simplest is one-on-one. I assign one volunteer to one student with either a worksheet or a list of activities to complete. Sometimes I assign a volunteer to 2 students. Usually I do this in the case that the 1 or 2 students is at a much higher or much lower group than the average for that class. This gives them more individuated attention. Perhaps my personal favorite way to use volunteers is in a group setting. A group is usually 5 to 8 students at a table with one volunteer. For the most part, I would have the volunteer do activities that I had demonstrated before, either at class level or separately after class to the volunteer, or demonstrated by doing it with a group this size myself while the volunteer shadows me. Once I feel comfortable that the volunteer can lead my activities, I can plug them in with their group to lead those types of activities at the points I like in class. This is great for students to get a lower teacher-student ratio, more personal time, more practice time, and also take away some of that nervousness of speaking in front of the whole class or speaking to their official teacher. This also gives the volunteer a lot of autonomy and a chance to make friends with a particular group of students. I like to think of my volunteer and students as buddies, as friends. The volunteers create safety in the classroom by giving the students a safe way to express if they don't understand or don't like something without having to approach the teacher or say it in front of the whole entire class. Another way I use volunteers is to have myself and the volunteer give examples of interactions in English. This is really useful to show students what actual real-time conversations are like having to do with the units that we're talking about. My volunteers will surprise me. They will use the words that I taught, but they will also use other words or phrases that are more familiar to them. This brings me to my next idea. What do you think? I ask my volunteers often what they think. Different people from different parts of the United States or parts of the world will have different English speakers' experiences with words or phrases. They'll have different ways of showing and knowing concepts. This can be very useful for students to see and hear things in multiple approaches. What does a volunteer with little direction do? What do I do? This volunteer asks. Let's say the teacher has a large class or is a very teacher-centered way of teaching, and the class is here, the teacher is here. This is often common with not only large classes, but also newer teachers who may not have worked with volunteers before and may not be sure what to tell the volunteer when they start. In general, if you are in this situation, when the teacher stops talking, look for students who look confused, are not working, or are not connecting with others in the class. You want to go to these students first and offer to do the activity with them. It's helpful to squat down and get on eye level or grab a chair and sit eye to eye with students instead of hovering over them. You can ask your teacher, the teacher that you're working with, what their philosophy is on using your L1 in the language, your native language in the classroom with the students. But what I like to do is use it only as needed to build camaraderie and to explain the directions of an activity, not the actual content of the lesson. If you are a volunteer and you feel like you're not getting much direction from your teacher, one thing you can do is wait till a time when class is over and interview your teacher. First, ask the teacher if this is a good time to talk about volunteering in the class. Teachers are often very busy and sometimes work multiple jobs. Make sure it's a good time to talk to them about the class before you launch into questions. When you have time, you can ask, "What would you like me to do?" If it's a teacher who is very busy or is not accustomed to working with lots of volunteers, they might not have a very clear answer to this question. That's why I've added some follow-up questions. What should I do when a student can't read the material? Depending on your teacher's class level of the students and the teacher's own teaching philosophy, this answer may be different, but it's important that you be in sync with the teacher you're working with. What should I do when a student says something incorrectly? Again, the same will apply. And going along with this, what should I do when a student writes something incorrectly? Depending on the students in class, their level, their attitudes towards learning English, and the class culture that's been developed over time, students will be comfortable with a different level of correction. If you correct too much, students may feel intimidated or like they're doing a bad job. If you don't correct at all, they may miss some opportunities to learn. So it's a balance you should really discuss with the teacher you're working with. Another good question is, are there any students you really want me to focus on? It would be helpful for you as a volunteer to know why this teacher wants you to work with these students. Maybe that student is good at English but doesn't like to speak up in class. Maybe they just really haven't connected with any friends in class, or maybe it's their writing that they really need help with. There are lots of reasons a teacher might decide that one student could use a little bit more help than the rest. Ask the teacher, what does the student need? And then you can ask, can you show me how to practice with them? If you have the teacher actually show you how to go through an activity or worksheet with a student the way they want, you'll be able to work more independently when the teacher is busy addressing the whole class. These are some tips about using volunteers in your classroom from a teacher perspective or a volunteer perspective. And of course, you can always contact us at RIT for more questions and answers about volunteers. Thanks a lot. Bye.